Let us listen together now as we hear from the Gospel according to Matthew, the 25th chapter, beginning with the first verse and reading through the 13th verse. Jesus says, "Then the kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout, 'Look, here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him.' Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise replied, 'No, there will not be enough for you and for us. You had better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves.' And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the other bridesmaids came also, saying, 'Lord, Lord, open to us.' But he replied, 'Truly I tell you, I do not know you. Keep awake, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour.'" This is the written word of God for all of God's people. Glory be to you, O Christ. Amen. Well, the story of the 5 foolish and the 5 wise bridesmaids has some problems. It's not a perfect story. We're better off, I think, if we confess our trouble with it right away. For instance, could the wise bridesmaids have shared with the foolish ones? Sharing is good, isn't it? And what does "I don't know you" have to do with being late? What bridegroom fails to recognize wedding guests just because they aren't on time? Shouldn't he have thrown his arms around them and said, "I'm glad you finally made it"? The story doesn't feel very gracious. It just doesn't. This is our, not yours. You're late and you failed to be prepared, so you can't come in. The gospel-y, Jesus-y side of me doesn't really like the sound of this at all. Not at all. It sounds like a zero-sum pie to me, at least where the metaphor is concerned. In order for us to advance, someone else is required to not advance. There's only so much of God's kingdom to go around, and more for you means less for me. You know, in fact, I think this story would make a good letter to an advice columnist, don't you? It would sound something like this. "Dear advice columnist, my cousin was recently married. On the way to the reception, half of the bridesmaids had a flat tire. The others refused to help, but rushed on to the reception. When the others finally arrived, my cousin claimed not to know them and wouldn't let them come in. It's caused quite a rift in the family. Were some of these folks out of line? Or am I crazy?" That's what it says up there. "Or am I crazy? Please help." Now, I realize I'm changing the story up here, I know that. In the actual parable, it's the bridesmaid's job to greet the groom when he arrives to escort the bride to their home. And the 5 foolish bridesmaids have failed miserably because they weren't prepared for his delay. In the Mediterranean culture, a delay was not unusual or unexpected, so they should have been prepared for a delay, but they weren't. And the fact of the matter is, there's not enough oil to share. There's just not. If one shares with the other, she won't have enough. Bringing lamps with no extra oil was was foolish. And bringing lamps with plenty of extra oil, well, that was wise. Now, forget that it's Jesus telling the story, and we would prefer that he would be a little kinder, and realize that the consequentialist side of any of us, if you have a consequentialist side, should be satisfied with the story the way that it's told. You either do what you should have done and the outcome is satisfactory, or you fail to do what you should have done and you face the consequences. In its original context, the story made a lot of sense. A wedding was a tremendous occasion, a week-long affair held in the couple's home and filled with joy and feasting and celebration. And virtually everyone from 6 to 60, as the rabbis would say, was to cease all other activity and come to the wedding feast. Even those who were studying the law were urged to put aside that study for the lighter, brighter, more joyful time. And there was no certainty about when the wedding would begin. Far from the weddings we know, where if the invitation says 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there better be music and candles and a wedding party at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And if you show up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you could expect to see the bridegroom right there, right on time. Nobody was certain just exactly when the Middle Eastern wedding of Jesus' day would begin. It all depended on when the bridegroom decided to show up. So everybody had better just be ready. That seems to be the theme and the rule of this whole wedding bit, is that you're supposed to be ready. So what's the point? What's the point? It appears most likely that Matthew is encouraging his early Christian readers to be ready for Jesus to come a second time. Yeah. No matter how long it might take. And it was, in fact, taking a little while. You can go to sleep, okay, but if you go to sleep prepared. Go to sleep ready. Be ready to greet the bridegroom at any time and any hour. And in the case of this parable, Jesus comes later rather than sooner. Many Christians today don't expect the return of Jesus at all, or at least they don't say much about it. And those who do talk about it tend to speak of it as though they figured it all out, right? And it's probably going to be tomorrow. But in this story, those who are expecting the bridegroom sooner are deemed foolish. And those who are prepared for the bridegroom to be delayed are proven wise. In which case, maybe the bumper sticker should say this. It should say, Jesus is coming later, much later, not soon. And if that's the case, what are we supposed to do? An immediate end solves everything. An immediate end says, well, don't do anything. Jesus is coming soon. Don't worry about it, or go around hollering that Jesus is coming soon, so you better be ready. A delayed end, on the other hand, demands of us some way of living in the meantime, some kind of oil for our flasks. This is no insignificant message in a world where often it appears that God isn't doing much of anything. Where the daily news of disaster and division and disease is the same morning after morning after morning. And the notion of a morning unlike every other morning seems so far off that you feel you ought just as well to go to sleep, unprepared for anything new. This is a word we need to hear in a country where the elections are over now, finally. They're over. And it's up to those who made promises to keep those promises. And we have to admit, do we not, that we're a little bit skeptical as to whether they will. And whether anything will be any different from how it was before. This is a word we need to hear, where even in the church we get bogged down with business and business as usual. figuring that if God were going to do any more than God is already doing, God would have done it by now, so we sort of just go on about our business. Don't forget your oil. That's what the story shouts. Don't give up. Don't give in. Be ready. Be prepared. Be on your toes and be alert. God is still coming. And in fact, God hasn't gone anywhere. Do we believe that? Do you believe that? Do you believe that? Do I really believe that? So maybe the idea, remember this story isn't particularly easy to untangle, but maybe the idea is to not give up on the notion that God is on the way and that God is still at work. And if you look for it, and if you watch for it, and if you dare to live with expectation in a world where the so-called facts seem to suggest otherwise, and you work and you prepare and you live as if it were so, even though it doesn't always look as though it were so, you might just catch a glimpse of it. You might see it. So what's the oil that we need to bring along in sufficient supply as to be able to stay in the game for the long haul? What is it? Is it faith? Sure. Good. Is it good works? Sure. Good. Whatever it takes to believe that God is still on the way and that God isn't finished doing things here, it's probably the right kind of oil. So bring it. But do bring it. That seems to be what the story suggests. We need to bring it. It's easy for folks to say, I want to feel like a Christian. And I want to feel like a Christian right now. Translated, give me some of your oil. But when it comes to having faith, doesn't it make more sense for me to give you some idea of how to cultivate your own than to simply hand you mine as though mine were even designed just as your faith should be designed? When it comes to good works, can you transfer yours over to me? Can you do that? Or will I only reap the benefit if I do them myself? Some things cannot be borrowed. They just cannot be borrowed. You've got to bring your own. I have a couple of recurring dreams. I might have shared one or both of these with you before, but in one dream, it's the first day of Big Folk Camp, and it's Saturday, and it's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or if it's a little worse dream, it might be around 7 o'clock in the evening. And I realize I haven't begun to think about my campfire message. I have not looked at the scripture. I have not gotten ideas or images or an outline in my head. I have done absolutely nothing. And campfire is at 9. That's a bad dream, I want to tell you. And in the other dream, I'm in college. We're going a little further back in time. And it's about 2 weeks until the end of the semester. And I realize all of a sudden it occurs to me, I have not done any of the reading assignments. I have not even begun. It's a bad dream. It's not good. And no matter what kind of a mess I am in, nobody else can prepare for that campfire message but me. I've got to do it myself. Nobody else can read those reading assignments for me. I've got to do them myself. And they won't get done. None of it will get done in an instant. It just doesn't work that way. I want to feel like a Christian. I want to feel like a Christian right now. Or to put a little different twist on it, I'll start doing the things that people of faith do as soon as I feel more faithful. I'll volunteer with Habitat for Humanity or Austin's Place or Empty Tomb when I feel motivated to. I'll give more money to the church or to other helping agencies as soon as I get my act together on the inside. I just don't have my act together yet. I'll study the Bible in a small group with other people after I get my heart in the right place. I'll pray when I hear God talking to me first. I'll worship in church when I sense more of God in the everyday. I'll forgive when I feel forgiven or when I feel like forgiving. I'll make things better for others when things get better for me. But I think maybe we have it backward. I think maybe we do. I think that maybe the doing comes first. Do it first. Maybe we'll feel faithful when we start acting faithfully. Maybe you do it and then you feel like it later. And if you don't do it, you might never feel like it. Let's say I want to be a great basketball player, okay? So I decide that as soon as I start feeling like a great basketball player, I'm going to start practicing. How do you think that's going to work? Probably not very well. On the other hand,